So thank you very much for the introduction. Would you remind me too the 2 minutes? I don't think I will take that much. No. Yeah. Hanan has given us this introduction in terms of the importance of recognizing human diversity and difference. And then I'm very grateful that Liam has taken us to the root of peace education. And Eleonora then illustrated the possibility. So I'm going to stand back and invite everybody back to the origin of understanding 3 concepts. One is what is peace. 2 is what is peace education. And thirdly, where is the religion's place in peace education? So I have 3 things to talk about. The first thing is it's a positive conception of peace. The second, I look at peace education that's conceived from this positive conception. The third thing I'm going to talk about is place of religion in this. So the term peace. Well, I think everybody could reflect your own concepts of understanding of peace. The term peace applies to a wide range of situations, and those already touched upon. For instance, there's peace in the Liam's setting is about its international relations, national security in countries, but there's also peace in neighborhood, in a family. There are also peace in processes, and someone just asked Hanan a question about the Israeli and the Palestinian peace process. And there's also relations in peace in relationship amongst people, but also there's a peace from inner perspective. So how do we understand peace? At the one hand, we want to avoid a situation where peace is, well, there is a term, actually, peace is a pieces, because there's so many different conceptions of peace. When when in that fragmentation, it is difficult to talk about peace, and it's difficult to move towards peace in the community or in the global processes. But at the same time, we don't want to have a one unifying concept of peace. There's losing all the pluralistic flavor of it. So how do we understand peace? Typically, peace is, definition of peace is constructed in a positive and negative. What is negative? Negative is peace is the absence of violence or absence of war. And but peace is peace and absence of conflict. And so that's the question that negative peace starts with. We don't tend to see peace as just absence of violence or war, because when you contrast peace with violence, we are following, Hanan would recognize the Hobbesian view that humans, the human natural condition is de facto at war and is violent, competitive. And so, but is peace the absence of conflict? Well, if we look at conflict is in fact in part the ebbs and flows of life. Conflict is unavoidable. Therefore, we may see peace actually as a potential feature of all aspects of human life that involves conflict. But what makes it peaceful? And a peaceful is a particular kind of quality that can come, the violent tendency in all the conflictual dimensions of human experience, from the kind of, we talk about international relations, our relationship with nature and so on, but also in terms of our own self-identification and our affiliations, our attachment, our sense of belonging, and so on. So hence, peace does not require eliminating of conflict. And instead, peace may invite what we all talk about, dialogue, and engage proactively those conflicts. So now, looking at peace from a positive perspective as a bridge, we can say peace actually is a human concept. Therefore, it is a value. And in fact, peace is a spiritual value, because peacefulness, it can be an inner state. Lots of faith traditions, religious teaching tend to see peace as that inner state. and we touched upon it. It's a special kind of tranquility whereby the person identifies with oneself as the essence of the I. The essential I is a spiritual I. In lots of traditions, they call it the soul. Hence the phrase, I am a soul. So this is when the person self-identifies as the spiritual I or the soul as a primary. And this is where we could unify the other self-identifications, such as identity based on ethnicity, language, class, gender, and so on and so forth. And so this spiritual I, when the spiritual I is the overarching self-identity, over and above all other forms of self-identification, that we found peace. So this is more of a bridge. Now we move from negative to positive peace. So positive peace, a peace is positive because it's also presence of something. Peace has positive attributes. So first we'll talk about the presence of that spiritual quality embedded in the I. And here we can link to what Hanan already highlighted, that a positive peace assumes that persons are bearers of value. And this is when we recognize ourselves as bearers of intrinsic values and non-instrumental values. And this is a very important self-conscious awareness. And this constitutes a fundamental form of self-dignity, self-respect, and self-love. And it is thereby constitute in our well-being, and our well-being and its contents. What constitutes our well-being? And well-being includes our activities, our experience and processes, relationship, and our appreciation ourselves and our life as meaningful. So in a sense that positive peace involves our actively living out the spiritualness or spiritual I or humanness in the good life. Now this means that it's a holistic understanding of peace. And I will just capture it once again. A holistic understanding of peace unifies the diverse layer and the multiple dimensions of peacefulness from an undivided vantage point. As we just seen, peace has integral meaning from one's inner state of being to the ways that one perceives and relates to oneself, with other persons, with other beings on the planet, for instance. And peace involves community relationship, international, transnational relations, but also involves the socio-economic and political system. And peace also can be a feature of institutional cultures and practice. And this conception of peace really highlights that although the psychology or the inner state of persons can be shaped by social structures, or the inner psychology of persons can be shaped by the social structures and political system that we find ourselves. Nevertheless, because it's the inner spiritual I that we're cultivating, so humans can also make our own history, even if the conditions of such choice is not decided by us. In other words, that peace entails a conscious and enduring striving of humanity towards that peacefulness. It's almost like peace is a verb, although we don't have the verb peacing, but almost like peace is a verb, it's an active process. So this striving towards peacefulness, as already seen, is comprised at different levels. There's the individual level. Individually, it consists that persons trying to actively strengthen our own capacity for that self-transcendence, going towards that spiritual I. Relationally, it points at our goodwill towards other people through our friendship and sharing. And it consists of willingness to listen in the context of dialogue and collaborative ventures. But outwardly, it points towards an ethic of caring, including caring for the goodness in the world. And structurally, this striving means that we need to design institutions around this principle of spiritual value of peacefulness. So what does it mean? These the holistic conception of, or positive conception of peace, how does that take us to peace education? We often see peace education as resolving conflict through classroom practice. We talk about religious education, so that there is less tension between different religions and so on. But is that really the nature of peace education? So from this positive conception of peace and a holistic understanding of peace, we can see that peace education aims should be looking at those dimensions reflectively towards students' self-transcendence by cultivating the spiritual and the peaceful human qualities and nurturing our holistic well-being. So that's the inward leaf. And the second aim of education is towards developing, Eleonora talked about those openness and curiosity, critical elements, willingness to encounter, to listen, to dialogue, to engage with others with difference, and to mutually recognize our shared humanness and our self-dignity embedded in the humanness. When equally, peace education should cultivate that attitude of caring for others, for things in the planet, for good causes, and for things that have meaning beyond ourselves, but equally take a proactive attitude towards that and take as having a sense of responsibility for advancing goodness in the world. So that is the aim of education itself. Eleonora talked about Paulo Freire's quote, being in the world and with the world. But Paulo Freire really talk about education essentially making each of us more fully human. So the second implication for peace education, I would say that our conception of peace can have implication for the features of education system. Is the system loving and caring? Is the system humanizing, enabling our human becoming? Is the system sensitive to students' holistic well-being? Is the system allowing us to live the value of the relational and the ethical? Is the system allowing us to co-create activities, to take part in those collaborative ventures that constitute in peace process? And is the system a reflection of the spiritual dimension of our being? So these questions, so this understanding of peace really challenge the education system. And you can see these questions are not answered in a positive way in our current education system. One feature is our education encourages competition through its system of testing. Our education praises individual success rather than the loving, caring, and collaborative features that are essential for peace building, for peacemaking. Our current education system deprives those at the margin, pushing them further into despair. I just know what that Eleonora talked about, the inclusivity and the loving. So maybe we need to reconceive the education system if we want it to contribute to peace. And the last implication of this, our conception of peace, is to do with the education process itself. Well, with Gill education has consists of interlocking pillars. So the one is we need to have a concept of learning. We already talk about learning is actually seeking towards self-transcendence and human becoming. Well, the other pillar is pedagogy. Leonora talk about all kinds of pedagogy, transformative pedagogy. It's really at the center of it. The pedagogy is our process of engaging students from that spiritual core, but also from our own spiritual core. In that relating, the pedagogy become truly transformative. But think about another pillar, that is a curriculum. What is a curriculum? Is a curriculum just a set of things that we study from outside of ourselves? Or curriculum is a co-creating, because curriculum come from, it's the journey. And maybe curriculum is we co-creating a learning journey together, involving students' voice in bring the different elements together to make our collective shared journey a part of that we becoming. And the next pillar we already touched upon is, at the moment, it's called assessment. How about we call it evaluation? So that education is beyond the tyranny of testing, it's relationally conceived. And so that education evaluation is about valuing our learning process, valuing people's relationship within that learning process. And the last pillar is all this is enveloped, what Hanan talked about, the community. It's community allows as a transcending the interaction between roles. So when we come to an educational environment, it's not designated by roles. It's more than, because we are more than the role we occupy. So the enabling more personal, more caring, more loving relationship at all levels. In this sense, so peace education becomes education itself. Now, my third point is, where does religion and religious education come in? So often we heard, and this has already been touched upon, religious education is about learning about education, or learning of and learning about religion from outside of religion, or learning of religion, or learning from religion that's inside. So it's either there's an outside in view or inside out view of religious education. So in today's pluralistic societies that Hanan highlighted, religious education is interreligious education. Esther, I've got 2 minutes left, so I'll complete in 2 minutes, no problem. So in a sense that religious education can only be interreligious education. That pedagogy for difference means all religious education has to be interreligious education. Now, so religious education within our conception of peace and within our conception of peace education, that means interreligious education should help a young person to recognize there's a fundamental spiritual core shared by all religions of faith. That is the transcendent. And that means interreligious education should allow all the children and young person who were born in a particular religious environment to learn to better appreciate and understand, interpret the teaching of their own religion. Again, that transcendent. And this celebrated the transcendent nature of spiritual dimension of all religion can serve to unite rather than divide, providing ground for acceptance of difference. And so interreligious education in this way, as a part of peace education, would open up the opportunity for children and young people to develop their self-concept and consider the spiritual dimension as part of the unfolding self. Now, just to conclude, I bring this back into a quick summary. So peace has positive, I started with saying peace has positive attributes. And then I also said that peace is a human concept, therefore it's a spiritual value. And when this primary self-identity as the spiritual I, then that's when the peacefulness can come, the antagonist tendency to the conflictual dimension of human being. So peace education, that's conceived, is not a study of peace from outside of peace itself, or prevention of violence or resolution of conflict. Or it's not even just about learning about justice and citizenship, global issues, and so forth. Although these are important, peace education is best achieved through this humanizing education we just talked about. It is itself comprised in nurturing the quality that can make our well-being more fully complete. Religious education would pledge on what religion offers best, that is community, loving and caring practices, stressing our human dignity and encouraging the ethical dimensions of being. And so to conclude that peace is education as humanization.